Welcome you all. I am Dr. Thilagavathy, Assistant Professor, Department of Botany, Seethalakshmi Ramaswami College. In this video, I will talk about an interest topic, that is plant movements. It is the important aspects of plants. Locomotion means organism can move from one place to another place. It is the characteristic features occurs in animals. But movements means which of the leaf or any part of the plant move up and downward direction. Even in closing and opening of stomata consider as movements. There are two types of movements on the basis of the response, that is, movements of locomotion and movements of curvature. Movements of locomotion means whole part of the plant or cell or cytoplasm move from one place to another place. That movements occurs in naturally, that is called autonomic or spontaneous movements of locomotion, are induced by any external stimulus, that is paratonic or tactic movements. The movements of curvature in higher plants, which are fixed or restricted only to the bending or curvature of some of their parts. There are two types, that is autonomic and paratonic movements of curvature. Autonomic movements of locomotion, there are different types, that is ciliary movements, amoeboid movements and cyclosis movements. Paratonic or tactic movements of locomotion, that is phototactic or phototaxis, hemotaxis or hemotactic, thermotactic or thermotaxis. Let us see the autonomic movements of locomotion. Such a movement takes place due to the presence of cilia or flagellate. Example, Chlamydomonas. The movements not only occurs in Chlamydomonas, occurs in volvax, flagellated bacteria and ciliated reproductive cells. Next one is the amoeboid movements. It is the most common mode of the locomotion achieved by the pseudopodia. It involves in the flow of cytoplasm as extension in an organism. In higher plants, the cytoplasm, including various cell organelles, move around the large vacuole. That movement is called protoplasmic streaming or cyclosis. There are two types, that is rotation and circulation. The rotation movements exhibited by hydrilla plants, the cytoplasm move either clockwise or anti-clockwise rotation. In circulation movements exhibited by staminal hairs of Tradescantia, the cytoplasm move both clockwise and anti-clockwise around many small vacuoles. This is the paratonic or tactic movements of locomotion occurs in volvax, response to the external stimulus of light. In weak light, there is no response, but in a strong illumination, volvax, it becomes very active and move towards the light sources. This type of movements is called as phototactic movement. Next one is the chemotactic movement. The organism responds to the chemical stimulus. Example in movements of anthrozoids in bryophytes. The female reproductive organ produce sucrose or malic acids. The time the male gametes responds to these chemicals and got the movements after the male gametes move from male reproductive part to female reproductive part. After reach the egg cells and involve the process of fertilization. Such a movement results due to the response of heat stimulus, example in Chlamydomonas. One large vessel containing Chlamydomonas in a cold water. The time the water is warmed one side, Chlamydomonas responds to these reactions and collect towards the warmer side. This movement is called as thermotactic movement. Let us see the autonomic movements of curvature. There are two types. One is the variation movements and growth movements. In variation movements, curvature or any bending of the plant parts is the temporary. But in growth movements, it is a permanent in nature. That is hyponastic, epinastic, nutational and circumnutational movements of curvature. But in the paratonic movements of curvature, when the growth movements occurs due to the external stimulus, which is unidirectional. That is called tropical movements. The phenomenon is known as trophism. That are phototrophism, geotrophism, hyotrophism, chemotrophism, and thermotrophism. Paratonic movements of variation are nastic movements. The movements occurs response to the external stimulus, which is not unidirectional but diffused. This type of movements is called as nastic movements. There are nictinastic, photonastic, thermonastic, seismonastic, and thigmonastic. Autonomic movements of curvature or movements of variation occur in telegraph plants, that is Desmodium gyrans. It is one of the best example of movements of variation. In this plant, the compound leaf consists of one large terminal leaf and two lateral leaves. During the daytime, the lateral leaves contain peculiar and interesting movements. The leaves move upward direction 90 degree. Again they move light to the parallel axis. In the same way, again they move downward direction in 190 degree after they lie parallel to the axis. This type of movements is called as movements of variation. The autonomic movements of growth occurs in bifacial organs like sepals, petals, and young leaves. Due to these results, the differential growth occurs in the side of the organ. That time, the overgrowth occurs in the lower side of the flowers. Flower will close. This response is called as hyponastic movement. This is the epinastic movements. The overgrowth occurs in sepals and petals. What happened? So petals and sepals move downward or bending downward directions. Examples, there is opening of flowers. Next one is the nutational movements. The movements occurs in bending movements. Example in stem emissus because the movements occurs in zigzag manner. The circular movements often exhibited by the growth of the plant tips. The best circumnutational movements occurs in the tendril types of the plants. The paratonic movements of curvature or tropical movements means the plant's response to the external stimulus of unidirectional. For example, the plant's response to the gravitational force, that movements is called as geotrophic movements. The phenomenon is called as geotrophism. The growth of primary stem and root can be easily demonstrated for these trophical movements. In maize, the radicals are grow in downward directions and coleoptile they move in upward directions. In the same manner, in dicot plants, the roots they move towards the gravitational force. That movement is called as positive geotrophic, and shoot they are go in upward direction. That is a negative geotrophic. Next, tropical movements is one of the phototrophic movements. The growth movements occurs to the external stimulus of light. It is the best example of young potted plants. One young potted plants kept in a window of closed room. When the plants reach the light sources, the plants move towards the sources of light. Because the growth hormones they are present in the tip of the plant. When the plants receive the light, the over hormones they are present in the shaded sides. The automatically more growth occurs in the shaded side, so the plants responds and curve towards the light directions. This movements is called as phototrophic movements. This phenomenon is known as phototrophism. Next one is the thigmotrophic movements or thigmotrophism. The plant's response are caused by the stimulus of touch. That is the best example, tendril of the plant movements. That is the thigmotrophic movements. This type of movements occurring and response to the water stimulus. The type of movements is called as hypertrophic movements or hypertrophism. When the example in growth of roots towards the water. This type of movements, plant organs responds to the chemical stimulus. In higher plants, female reproductive structure, synthesis of chemical substance. That time, male gametes or pollen grains responds and got the response to this chemical and reach the stigma. After the pollen grains are growing to the stigma and stay, finally reach the egg cell. These movements are called chemotrophic movements or chemotrophic. Any part of the plant or whole plant, their response to the different temperature, even in hot or cold, the trophic movements is called as thermotrophic movements. The phenomenon is called as thermotrophism. It's an example in rhododendron plant. In many plants, the flowers and leaves are occurs in different position during day and night time. In Lucana claca, the leaves are closed at night. That movement is called as sleeping movement or nictinastic movement. It is the interesting paratonic movements of variation or seismonastic movements occurs in Mimosa pudica. When we are touched the compound leaves or give the shock treatment to the compound leaves, the stimulus is passes downward the pulvinal, so all the compound leaves or pinnules is successfully closed. That movement is called as seismonastic movement. Finally, thigmonastic or haptonastic movements. These movements occurs due to the response to the touch of stimulus of the insects. Occurs in Drosera plants. When the insects sit on the leaves, the tentacles curve inward and trap the insects. These movements are called as thigmonastic or haptonastic movements. Is one of the paratonic movements of variation. So all the movements are very important and also helps the growth and development of the plants by facilitating the movements of roots, stems and leaves towards the sunlight, nutrients, water, etc. Thank you.